Hi guys, it's Heather with Running with Scissors, and today are doing the tutorial on your November 2024 box number 49. It's in the box subscription, and this is what we are making. It's so cute, and I love the different colors. So let's get started. All right, so let's see what's in the box. Of course, you're going to have your instruction sheet, and this is just a sample for right now because I will write the instructions when we're all done to make sure I didn't miss anything. And in that upper right hand corner, of course, is your QR code, and it navigates you to this video. We have our wood pieces on the bottom here, and then we have some ribbons and zip ties and jute and glue. And then we have a few different paint colors and some sponges, and we put a brush in your kit this month to do the wreath berries because we thought that might be a little bit difficult without a brush, so we gave you a brush. All right, so I'm going to pull everything out of the box and I'm just going to set it aside. You can use your box as a table cover to paint on if you would like, but for me, I'm just going to use my table cover as always. And I'm going to start with my backer board. Now, we decided to do more of a washed out design. So you're going to want to have a pair of scissors handy and a cup of water. And I just got this tiny little cup of water. That's all I need. And make sure you have some baby wipes as well, as they're always useful. Now, you do not have to do the washed out design if you don't want to. We're going to take our paint and we're going to make our paint look like stain instead of opaque. If you want to just paint yours a solid opaque color, then you just go ahead and do that. That is totally up to you. All right, I'm going to start with my backer board. So I'm just going to move my pieces off to the side for a moment. And you'll see that your backer board is scored to help you place your trees a little bit better and to make sure that your board is straight. And it also gives you kind of an idea of where you need to paint and where you don't need to paint. So I'm going to paint this back portion here that will sit behind the trees. I'm going to stain it brown, faux stain it brown. So I'm going to take my white wedges and I'm just going to cut one in half. I'll probably end up cutting them all in half, but for now I'm just going to cut one. Now if you're going to paint this opaque, you can go ahead and use the soft side of your yellow sponge, but for me I'm just going to use this a half of a wedge here, and I'm going to dip my wedge in a little bit of water just to dampen it slightly, and then I'm going to grab a little bit of that brown paint. Don't want too much of it. And I am going to faux stain my backer board. Now I'm going to try not to do the whole thing because I feel like that's a waste of time and materials. So I'm just going to go around my trees. But what I'm going to make sure I'm paying attention to is that I'm getting a nice even coat. So if I feel like my sponge is running out of paint, I will grab some more paint. And I'll show you that in just a second. So you can see right here, I'm running out of paint and it's getting progressively lighter. So at this point, I'm gonna have to add some more paint. And eventually my sponge will not be wet anymore and I will have to grab some more water as well. All right, so you don't have to paint the bottom of this here because this piece is going to overlap that. So we're just gonna set that aside. And then for this piece, I'm going to do more like a dry brush brown over top of a white. So I'm gonna go ahead and open my white. I'm gonna grab my other white sponge. And I'm going to just give this a thin coat to begin with. All right, we're gonna let that first coat dry. That's going to need 2 coats, so we'll set that aside for a second and we'll move on to our other pieces while we wait for that to get done. Now you have to decide how you're going to paint your trees. So the trees go like this, right? Yes, okay. So here's the order of your trees. You might want to lay those out so you can follow your color pattern a little bit easier. And I am going to, I would first decide what color you want your center tree to be. And for me, I want that to be kind of a bold color. So once again, I'm gonna just cut these other two sponges in half because that's how I'm going to work with them anyway. And once again, I'm going to wet my sponge and I'm gonna grab a little bit of the Couture teal. Okay, so that's that darkened teal paint. And then I'm going to just wipe this on to my large center tree. Now you're gonna wanna grab more paint if it starts being too watered down, or if it's too dry and it's becoming too opaque, then you're gonna wanna add more white. You can also do all of this with baby wipes. You do not have to use a sponge. So there's my center tree. Now that's probably the only tree that's going to be in that color, but the welcome is going to be in that color as well. And it's going to be, I'm not going to wet my sponge anymore for this. I'm going to do more of an opaque on it. So I'm going to go ahead and dip it into the paint and pounce off on the table. And then I'm going to come and pounce the first coat onto the word. And that will need 2 coats. So we're just gonna set that aside and let it dry, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. Now we are going to come back to our bottom part of our board, and we're gonna put another coat of white on it real quick. You could also use a yellow sponge on this if you feel like you needed a bit bigger sponge. It's a pretty small area to cover, so it's just as easy to use a half wedge. All right, that's good. We're gonna set that aside and let that dry. And we're gonna come over to our next set of trees, and we are going to, so for this tree, I'm gonna go with the Beachside Drive. That's this lighter shade of blue. And once again, I'm just gonna get my sponge slightly dampened and grab some of that blue and wash that onto there. And we're gonna set that aside. All right, so let's see. These 2 trees, I'm gonna do the same color. I do this one Beachside Drive as well. Yes, let's do this one Beachside Drive as well. And then these, I am going to do that real teal. That's this other shade of teal. However, I am going to lighten that slightly because I don't want that dark of a shade. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of my white. And a little bit of my teal. If you have a paper plate handy, that's probably the best way to do that. But I like to make things difficult, so. And you can use the wrong end of your paintbrush and you can mix that up. There we go, that's nice. Just a lighter shade, just didn't want it that dark. That works for me. Now, yet again, another half sponge dipped in some water here. And I'm gonna grab that paint color. I'm gonna do both of my trees that are left. And that's gonna be it for those. And then our wreath, I'm gonna go ahead and do white as well. Kind of forgot about the wreath, or I would have done it at the same time we did everything else that we were doing with the white. It's gonna need 2 coats, so just set it aside. All right, so now I'm gonna start focusing on the trees and what else I'm going to do to them. There's all kinds of things you can do with this sign. If you wanted to do paint on stripes here with your fine point brush, you could paint in where the score marks are to divide the trees. But for me, I kind of just want to leave the score marks as some like decoration or definition to the tree. And to the edges, I'm going to darken a little bit. So I'm just going to take, or lighten a little bit. I just want a contrasting color is basically where I'm going with that. So I'm going to take my lightest color. Actually, yes, I'm going to take my lightest color, which is that Beachside Drive. And I've pounced the majority of the paint off of my sponge. You can see in the upper hand corner of my screen there. And now I'm going to come in, I'm just going to drag that sponge along the edges of this tree. Just along the edges to lighten those edges up a little bit. You see, I don't have a lot of paint on my sponge. I just had what was left in it from the last time, and then I pounced most of that out. All right, and that's how that tree is going to stay. And then this one, I'm going to use that darker teal. Again, I have my sponge that I use for that. I'm just pouncing most of it out. I'm not adding any more paint to it. And I'm going to come and go along the edges of this. And I'm going to do the bottom edge as well. And you'll notice I did not do these two because that is where the other tree butts up into it. And so it's the other tree's responsibility for that shading. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other piece that is painted this color. Okay. Oh yeah, look at that. That looks fantastic. All right, so on this guy here, these two, I'm going to use the Beachside Drive. once again, just pounce majority of, oh, wait a minute. Let's do, yeah, we're gonna do the beachside drive. Most of the paint is probably out of your sponge by now. If you have to add a little bit more in, you absolutely can. You could also use the white sponge on this if you would have liked. Oh yeah, that looks great. All right, we're gonna come back over to our welcome and we're gonna get another coat on it. Now we're gonna have to add more paint to that sponge because we've pretty much used all of it. This should just need one more coat, but if it needs a third, we'll just pop another coat onto it quickly. All right, we're gonna set that aside. We're gonna put another coat on our wreath. Now you do have plenty of paint to paint your pieces opaque if you didn't want to go with that faux stain look. So go ahead and just pounce your paint on solid if you wanted to. And then we're gonna come over to this guy and we're gonna take our brown sponge, which is pretty much empty. Probably have to add a little bit of paint to it. Mine, I think, was too empty. I'm just working that paint into that sponge. And I'm gonna test this because I don't want too much brown on here. Now, if you get too much brown and you wanna take some off, use a baby wipe. And you just want a really light touch. I'm just hitting the edges. And I'm gonna kind of come through this so just a little bit. Very light touch. Try to keep your sponge moving. If you stop, this is why you get these. Okay, that's good for me. All right, so now I'm just waiting on my wreath to dry and my welcome word to dry. But because those are one of the last things that we put on, we're gonna be able to move on now. So I'm not done with my wreath. I am going to add little dots to each of those circles there. So I'm going to use the beachside drive. That's the lightest blue there. So I'm just gonna keep that paint open, but the rest of my paint I'm done with, and I'm just gonna close that up and get it out of my way. All right, I'm going to push everything aside and bring my backer board in front of me here. And I am going to glue on my, the lower portion there. All right, so you're just gonna tap your super glue. I'm using house glue. And you're gonna just do a thin line around the outside edge, about 1/4 of an inch away from the border of the edge of the wood there. And then just make sure that's lined up to the line so it's straight. And then make sure your edges are flush, okay? So the top of this will probably go over that line just a little tiny bit, but it's more to keep you straight this way. and apply pressure for about 5 seconds. And then that piece is set. And we're gonna start with the middle tree. And we're just putting a little zigzag line up the center of it. And we're gonna place that tree right back down. I'll get flush against that bottom board. And then left or right, just make sure it's inside or just overlapping the score marks on both sides of your board. All right, and then we're gonna work left to right here. Starting with the next tree that goes right up against the other tree. And that's so you don't get stuck and not be able to make a piece fit. Okay. And we are going to run some glue on the welcome. Now remember, just a little thin line. You don't need very much glue. If you get too much glue, pounce it off onto your table cover or your box, because you don't want that to squish out onto your project. And we're gonna center that out there and press down. All right, we're gonna set that aside for a second, and then we're gonna come back to this guy, and we're gonna grab our paintbrush. We're gonna use the wrong end of that paintbrush, and we are going to dip it into our beach glass, and then we're just gonna kind of circle, use your paintbrush to kind of paint or scratch the paint in a circle around those berries to create that berry. Some of them that are smaller, you can just go ahead and like plop it on and that's enough. But if they're a little bit larger, you'll have to go in a complete circle to spread the paint around. Okay, we're gonna give that a minute to set up and dry before we glue it on. So let's just set that to the side and we'll work on our bow and our hanger while that dries, and we'll apply that last. Okay, so you have your ribbons and 2 zip ties, and your ribbons are folded together. So we're just gonna keep them folded together, and then we're gonna fold them up like a taco. And we're gonna trim the end into a dovetail. We're gonna cut from the folded edge up and out to the corner. We're gonna flip it around, we're gonna do the same thing. Fold it up like a taco, cut from the folded edge up and out to the corner. And then you'll end up with 4 pieces. And then we're just going to make an X with those like this. And we want to reverse the colors. Make sure everything is centered. We're going to pick it all up. We're going to slide the larger zip tie underneath. And we're going to start cinching that zip tie down. Move the clasp to the back. Keeping it in the middle. Make sure you don't have paint on your hands. I got paint on my ribbon. All right, so I'm tightening down and I'm cinching at the same, I'm cinching my bow and flattening it out at the same time. I don't have it all the way tightened yet because I have to slide this other zip tie through. I'm going to slide that through, and then I'm going to finish tightening that first zip tie down, and I'm going to trim off that excess. And then I'm going to bring my sign around. I'm going to take my jute. I'm going to put one end through each hole, going from the front through to the back. Just like that. I'm going to grab both of those ends and bring them up. And then I'm going to tie an overhand knot with both of those loose ends. I'm going to bring that knot down so it's hidden in the back, but then I'm going to bring the back loop up and the front loop up and even them out just like that. And there we have our hanger. Now we're going to take our bow that we just made and we're going to wrap that zip tie in the back around both pieces of jute. On either side, I'm going to go for the left side, and then we're going to tighten that zip tie down and trim it off. Okay, there's that. Now the last thing we have to do is glue our wreath on, which my wreath is not 100% dry right now, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. I just have to be careful. You may want to let yours dry. Now this wreath won't take a whole lot of glue. I'm just going to put glue through the center all the way around. But if you get too much, remember, just pounce off. And then I'm going to lay my wreath right in the middle of my tree there. And you actually don't even need glue all the way around because only the top and the bottom are going to sit on that tree. And that's where that's going to go. And that is your sign for November 2024, box number 49. That was quick and easy, and I like the different colors. I have to tell you, I get tired of the red and the green and the white. So doing something a little bit different was great. And we had picked up these fabulous ribbons that coordinated really well with that color scheme. So, all right, guys, hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next month.